It's an honor to have iGen on with us today. This is our 7th Nation conversation. We've had Reverend Barber, Zephyr Teachout, Bill McKibben, Pramila Jayapal. I consider these great voices of resilience, of grounded hope, who give us a ballast in these unprecedented times, uncertain times. I think all of you know that some 60 million Americans are still working to deliver our groceries, to make sure we have electricity, to care for the sick. And without these people, our nation would not function. Yet millions are being paid very low wages and are not being provided the protective equipment they need to keep themselves, their families safe. I know iGen will talk about how this crisis is an opportunity. Our eyes are open in new ways to those who have been invisible to too many for too long, the value of workers, of caregivers, and why we need to give them the pay and benefits they deserve. A caring economy seems to me the new currency of our economy, the foundation of true security that should emerge. And there's no one better able to speak to that, about what caring across generation means, than iGen. iGen is the co-founder, head of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. She has worked to bring rights, quality work, dignity, fairness to the growing numbers of workers who care and clean in our homes, the majority of whom are immigrants and women of color. In 12 short years, with the help of more than 70 local affiliate organizations and chapters and over 200,000 members, maybe that's more now, the National Domestic Workers Alliance has passed domestic worker bills of rights in 9 states, that may be more, the city of Seattle, and brought over 2 million home care workers under minimum wage protections. iGen believes the future can be glimpsed in the margins of our economy and society, both the potential threats on the horizon and the solutions. And this is a moment where we are all much more understanding of how important the work of caring and cleaning is to millions of American working families. Domestic work has always been undervalued, the most vulnerable jobs in our economy. It has existed outside of existing frameworks for social protection and benefits, and that is where iGen's work has been so critical, in bringing it into a legal framework and providing dignity for this workforce. iGen in 2011 launched something called Caring Across Generations to unite American families in a campaign to achieve bold solutions to the nation's crumbling care infrastructure. It has catalyzed groundbreaking policy across this country. Her widely acclaimed book, The Age of Dignity, Preparing for the Elder Boom in a Changing America, has helped Americans make meaning of the need and opportunity for care for the aging. We've seen the cruelty of our economy and politics toward the aging in these times, and that's something to remember and never forget and fight to redress. Gloria Steinem called iGen's book an urgent, irresistible book, underscoring the overall message, quote, people getting older is not a crisis, it's a blessing. iGen is also a leading voice in the women's movement. In 2019, along with Cecile Richards and Alicia Garza, iGen co-founded Supermajority, a new home for women's activism, training, and mobilizing a multiracial, intergenerational community. She's been recognized among Time's 100 most influential people of the world, countless awards, including a MacArthur Genius Award in 2014. She's spoken everywhere, she's appeared everywhere. I will say it was interesting and exciting to see her as the influential voice in the Me Too movement that she also is, attend the Golden Globe Awards, that seems decades ago, with Meryl Streep as part of the launch of Time's Up. iGen is a member of the Democratic National Committee, a trustee of the Ford Foundation. We just learned before our call, she is on the Chicago Recovery Commission, co-chairing one of the committees. She's a remarkable person, and we're very honored to have her here. And I'm very pleased that her co-founder of Supermajority, Alicia Garza, will join us in the next weeks. Neral Zaliz Hogue, Robert Reich, the economist. And so onward. And thank you, iGen, so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Katrina. for that lovely intro. And what an amazing lineup you all have created here. So all my heroes and sheroes, of which you are one. I've learned so much from you over the years, Katrina. And major shout out to everyone in the Nation community. We are a community, and we are never alone because we have amazing journalism to keep us connected and keyed in on all the things that we need to know and keep track of. And huge shout out to all the people who have joined from all over the country. It's so awesome to see in the chat from Tennessee and Kentucky and Florida. So exciting that we can connect in this way. So I am with the National Domestic Workers Alliance, as Katrina mentioned, and we have been in rapid response mode since the COVID-19 crisis started to unfold. Before the crisis, the workforce that I represent, including nannies, house cleaners, and home care workers, all of the mostly women of color who provide caregiving and cleaning services in our homes. This workforce was already incredibly insecure and vulnerable coming into the crisis, in that the wages for this work have been very low, always historically, and the hours unpredictable. There's very little access to a safety net. 82% of domestic workers did not have a paid sick day, or health care, or any kind of paid time off. And so in that context, if you think about what it meant to come into a crisis of this scope and scale, there was no money to stock up on groceries or any urgent supplies. And very quickly, even before the stay-at-home orders, and before the travel bans, we were hearing reports from domestic workers about dramatic losses in jobs and income. We were hearing that clients were canceling at the last minute. We were hearing from nannies who got laid off, were told simply not to come in to work the next day. And so we were seeing an incredible amount of fear in terms of meeting basic needs and putting food on the table for your families, being able to keep the lights on and keep a roof over our heads. So there was an incredible financial insecurity that domestic workers were facing from the very beginning. And then we also had a whole set of workers who are continuing to work through the crisis, a really essential part of the essential workforce. Thinking of home care workers, for example, who are really the only lifeline to so many people who are living at home: older people, people with disabilities, people with chronic illnesses. And home care workers are providing life-saving services to those people who, some of them are the most vulnerable to the virus itself. And so in terms of groceries or medication or any kind of connection to the outside world, these home care workers are absolutely essential. And yet they were going to work every day, not without access to protective equipment, without access to testing and treatment, and their own children home from school, right? As schools have been closed, and no ability to have childcare for their children, really struggling to figure out how to care for themselves, keep themselves safe and their families safe, as well as the clients that they serve. So it's in that context that the National Domestic Workers Alliance has been responding and taking action and figuring out how we support this incredibly important workforce to stay safe and resilient. And some of the things that we've done include establishing one of the first relief funds, the Coronavirus Care Fund, which provides $400 in emergency cash assistance to domestic workers in need. And the workers are using the money to pay literally for groceries, for food, staples, to keep their phones turned on. And in many cases, their phones are the only way that their children can get access to remote learning who are home from school, right? So these essential expenses that we're helping to cover, but ultimately, we cannot replace a strong safety net, right? And what we've learned through this crisis is just how unsafe our safety net truly is, which also leads me to what I think is an incredible opportunity of this moment. I know the word opportunity is so strange to use in the moment of such devastation and loss. And yet, in the 20 some years that I've been organizing workers, never have I seen such an incredible awareness and recognition of how many workers that have been largely taken for granted and invisible, especially in our informal economy or in our low-wage service economy, that people are starting to recognize just how essential they are. That there are millions upon millions of people who've worked incredibly hard always and barely been able to make ends meet, working as grocery workers, as delivery workers, as gig workers, as bus drivers. And now our lives and our whole country's future depends on them. And it actually begs the question, how many workers are there that are actually essential that we've just never appreciated or valued or adequately protected? And so I feel like this is a moment, there is a window in this country to value, to recognize, and to protect work in America and American workers in a whole new way. And ultimately to establish the kind of safety net and protections that we have always needed. And if we think about who we're talking about in these essential sectors, it's workforces that have been disproportionately women, disproportionately workers of color, and it allows us the chance to look at who is the working class today really in the United States. I think we've often either kind of thought about work in a way that is either fetishizing or romanticizing the past in terms of notions of the factory worker or the office worker even, or we're romanticizing and fetishizing the future of some tech age where everybody's going to be a coder and then robots are going to be running everything. And really the truth is that we have been an incredibly courageous workforce of all kinds of workers who are important and essential even, who we have just failed to adequately protect and value in our economy. And this could be our moment to take that awakening and turn it into the kind of public policy that we've needed for a very, very long time. And one other thing I'll say, and then we'll open for conversation and questions, is now that we're all at home, there is also this kind of heightened awareness of all that happens in the home, including care. And I want to give a big shout out to all the family caregivers out there who I know are struggling right now. All the kids home from school, and you're trying to figure out how you homeschool, and you're realizing how hard American teachers work and how much they give our kids every single day, all day. And you've got daycare centers closed and summer camps closed, and our parents are being evacuated from nursing homes, and we're trying to work remotely from home, and it's so much. And it gives us a new appreciation of how ultimately fundamental and universal our family care needs are, and how we've just never adequately supported our family care needs in this country. In fact, care is an essential part of infrastructure for our economy to function. If we think about infrastructure as that which enables commerce and our economy to function, what could be more fundamental really, now that we see, right, what happens in our homes, how we take care of our families is actually the first most fundamental building block. And yet we've never invested in it. And certainly our home care workers who earn an average of $16,000 per year for their work, right, have never been an investment that we've collectively made. And this is our chance. This is our chance to make every care job a good job that you can take pride in. And the beautiful thing about that is investing in those jobs they're also job enabling jobs. If the goal is to get America back to work again, once we move out of this moment of crisis towards recovery, investing in our care workforce, investing in every family's ability to afford the care that they need is a huge part of, I think, what should be a recovery strategy that not only helps us recover, but helps us start to learn what it means to thrive in this country. So my hope is that all of us can stay safe in the short term, and that we can keep our essential workers safe. And there's a way to do that right now by calling your senator and telling them to vote yes on the HEROES Act, including essential worker protections. Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Ro Khanna have created an incredible framework called an Essential Workers Bill of Rights. And many of those provisions are in the HEROES Act, and we need those provisions to be enacted right away. It's everything from hazard pay to protective equipment to childcare, so that the domestic workers and the home care workers who are continuing to work can make sure that their children are safe, right? There's so many pieces here that are actually essential to keeping us safe. So we can take action now and call our members of Congress and do our part as we stay safe, and we can start to plant the seeds of the kind of recovery that will allow us to address these long-standing inequities and hopefully help us thrive in the long term.
Thank you, Ai-jen. You remind us of why it's so critical to value the essential workers of our time. You answered my question, which was what we could do to seize this moment of opportunity, as you described, to move legislation, to move thinking. And the Warren-Ro Khanna bill is obviously something you've asked us all to stand behind. So that's so important. I'm going to turn it over to Erin because I know there's so many questions, but the care infrastructure in this country has crumbled, and now is the opportunity, as you say, and people are seeing anew with their own eyes and living their own lives, which I think will contribute, I hope, to the opportunity you suggest.
Hey, Ai-jen. Before we jump into all the questions, I think maybe some context might also help. You are involved in a number of initiatives that are making a difference across a broad range of areas. And I wonder if you could just quickly maybe share with our audience what those are, because I think that'll form some of the context for the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, if you think about who domestic workers are, they are women. They are low-wage workers. Many of them are immigrants. This is the industry with the largest concentration of undocumented immigrants working in our entire economy. They are Black women and women of color. And so our work really does intersect with so many dimensions of economic, political life in this country. And so I am, and our movement is connected to Families Belong Together. We are connected to Supermajority, which is a new platform to mobilize women voters to vote. Maybe not so new anymore, but we are on a mission to put the power in the hands of women to achieve true equality. And we're a part of a number of efforts, the Essential Workers one being the kind of current in terms of improving life for low-wage workers. And we also found a campaign that Katrina has also mentioned called Caring Across Generations, which has been championing an idea called universal family care. The idea that in the 21st century, we should have universal access to the care that we need to make sure that our children, our aging loved ones, our loved ones with disabilities are able to stay safe and have the care that they deserve. And right now we're working with Representative Holland and Representative Castro to really champion caregivers and care infrastructure and universal access to care as part of our recovery efforts, in addition to the great efforts that are happening around essential work.
So Pat Trotter asks if your organization's involved in crafting legislation regarding minimum wage, healthcare, et cetera. And it's a three-part question. So is there support in Congress for your work? And what can the average person do to support your efforts?
It's a great question. There's so many good efforts underway in Congress right now. There's a lot of action happening because so many people are trying to, especially within the Democratic caucus, are really trying to champion solutions that can help us move out of this moment of crisis and into recovery. There are efforts to increase access to healthcare that Senator Sanders is championing. There's a really important effort that Congresswoman Jayapal is championing on paycheck guarantee to keep as many people connected to their employment as possible. There are efforts to raise the minimum wage to 15 an hour for everyone. And we are supportive of all of those efforts because we do believe that this moment is a moment of unprecedented crisis, and it gives us the opportunity to make some unprecedented leaps forward. This could be our New Deal moment to really reset our frameworks, our safety net, and really set us up for a good quality of life in the 21st century. But so much has to be updated and changed in order for that to take place. And so once again, call your members of Congress and tell them that these things are important to you. Essential workers' rights, access to health care, a strong, inclusive safety net that leaves no one behind. Immigrants, non-immigrants, everyone should be protected by a safety net in this country. And that is how we stay safe. And one thing that we've noted is that in this COVID era that our members of Congress are tracking Twitter quite closely. So do tweet your support for these initiatives, because it does make a difference when they hear from everyone. And we're in the middle of doing a Twitter campaign called the Rosie Challenge, using the hashtag Rosie Challenge and the hashtag Care for All, to highlight the incredible strength and resilience of caregivers and the importance of relief efforts that care for all of us. And so we're asking people to make the Rosie pose and take a selfie and post it on Twitter and tag your member of Congress. Ask them to take the Rosie Challenge too, and even better, support these policy measures. It's just one little piece of big set of pushes that we need to make together over the course of the next few weeks, few months, so that the next few years and few decades can be secure.
And just to make sure people get that, tag your senator. And do you have a hashtag for it? Are you doing hashtag Rosie Challenge?
Hashtag Rosie Challenge and hashtag Care for All.
Okay, great. So several people have asked or brought up universal family care. And Ann Martin is wondering if there's any push to get that in the Democratic platform.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. It's almost like a plant. And I want to shout out The Nation magazine for naming universal family care as the best new idea of 2019. That was so thrilling for us. No, so universal family care, as I mentioned earlier, is a new vision for care infrastructure. The idea that we would have one fund that we all contribute to from the time that we get our first job, that we can all benefit from, that helps us pay for childcare, long-term services, and paid family leave. Basically everything that we need to take care of ourselves and our families while we're working. And it would enable us to actually make care jobs, living wage jobs with benefits. And so for the first time, we would have the resources and the infrastructure in place to care for our families as we're working. And we are working very closely with Congressman Castro and Congresswoman Holland on ensuring as many elements of that are in every congressional package that gets discussed on the floor. And they released a framework that was about valuing caregivers to be included in this last round, and some pieces of it made it in, but we need to keep pushing. And I do think that as the conversation starts to move towards recovery, that this measure is going to be on the table. And the more that members of Congress hear from us about the importance of it, the more likely it will end up in at least an early version. And I'm hopeful ultimately that it will become a core part of our recovery strategy. Because I think it's not only aspirational and right, but actually quite practical when we think about what will be required to get the country back to work again.
Maureen Jackson asks, would you address the ageism rampant in the mainstream media related to virus and care for aging loved ones? She points out that it's as if workers and their aging clients don't matter in certain states' reopening plans.
I know, it's so deeply ingrained. And I think one of the first things that I started to see happening is a narrative that was really siloing out each of us from our respective families across generations. It's the fact that older people and their needs have been so sidelined and treated as almost disposable in this conversation has been horrifying. And so it is an indication of deep-seated ageism in our culture and fear of aging. And that is one of the fundamental things that Caring Across Generations has been trying to transform. The fact that we are in reality a multi-generational culture, and at our very best is when we're connected across generations, and that each generation needs support and investment in order to thrive and be a part of what is a healthy, vibrant culture in this country, is something that I think is really important for us to figure out how we move towards as a culture. And I think lifting up the first person stories of older people and their caregivers in this moment is a big part of how we can do that, to really start to shift the narrative. And it's something that Caring Across Generations has been really focused on. And we hope to do more of it, but share your story. And have your voice heard, and connect to some of these campaigns so that they can really see, so that we can actually have multi-generational movements that are addressing ageism alongside all the other injustices that we're trying to address in this moment.
So there's Pat Trotter, he has there's a follow-up pointing out that with Mitch McConnell in power, how do changes really get made, since he's a roadblock? And that connects with another question that I see about how do we change opportunities in our nation toward domestic work? How do we make people truly believe that these people are essential? So if you could speak to changing national attitudes as a roadblock, but then also these actual people who are roadblocks. How do we move these things out of the way?
Well, first and foremost, this is obviously a very important election year. And for those of us who are engaged and really following our policy and political debates, I think it's going to be a complex time in terms of how we get the country to the polls and to vote and have our voices heard. And I think it's part of our responsibility is to be super citizens and leaders in this moment, to make sure that people understand their rights as a voter, and to make sure that people understand what's at stake, which is really our lives, right? Nothing short of our lives in this moment. And this is an incredibly important election year for all of us to commit extra time to mobilizing our friends, our family, and our networks to vote, and to make sure that they have access to voter protection hotlines and all of the resources that will help guide people through the complexities of what it might look like in the fall. So that's really important. I think that something like the Essential Workers Bill of Rights, I mean, my hope is that all of us together will continue to open the window that has opened to valuing essential work, and to ultimately continue to open who we see as essential, to be more and more inclusive. If we have for so long not seen so many workers as valuable and essential, but suddenly we realize that they are, a question we should keep asking ourselves is who else might be working, who needs to be valued and uplifted and protected that we may not be seeing. And in fact, maybe, just maybe, all work in this economy is valuable and should be protected. And so we just have to keep opening up that window that has opened for us around essential work. And that happens through federal legislation. Whether Mitch McConnell budges on this or not, we have created a drumbeat that is unstoppable. And every state in the country should take up an essential workers bill of rights. And every city should consider. I know New York City, with the leadership of Councilmember Brad Lander, has introduced an essential workers bill of rights, right? There's so many levers where we can continue to keep the window open and continue to build the momentum behind our demands in the meantime. And it's really going to be on all of us. And so many of us have personal interactions with essential workers like domestic workers. And one very important thing we can do is just reach out and to say, keep the lines of communication open. If you can continue to pay your house cleaner or nanny, whether or not they come to work, please continue to do so. Please offer any kind of financial assistance you can. And please also have a conversation, check on them, see how they're doing, and talk about what it would look like to come back to work safely. And in fact, today we are going to be releasing what we call reentry guidelines, which will be a set of guidelines to help employers and domestic workers have a conversation about how to keep safe as people start to come back to work. Measures like that really demonstrate that you value the safety of and the work of the person working in your home is part of how we turn the tide culturally.
Thank you. So Asia Catalyst has a question and a comment. So they say, so wonderful to hear iGen today. And there are many people expressing thanks for you being here. So thank you. And the question is, they're curious to hear your perspective on sex workers in this narrative.
Oh, that's a really great question. I mean, I hadn't actually thought about it, but I think, just to be honest, I think that all work has dignity and should be protected, and everyone should be included in a safety net. And I've said that many, many times, and I will continue to say that. And I appreciate the question. I do think that this is the core of the conversation that we should be having, is how do we start to understand that all work has value and all workers should be able to work with safety and dignity, and that there is both a cultural aspect to that and a policy and systems aspect to that. And we are just so far, our safety net is just so unsafe for so many people. And there's some groups of workers who've been marginalized and put in the shadows for so long. This is our time to actually lift up those shadows, or bring everything into the light.
You mentioned in your opening that this moment is an opportunity to protect workers in a new way, and also to understand who the working class is in a new way. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that and to what might be possible.
Yeah. I mean, culturally, I do think that our dominant narratives about the working class have had an archetype associated with them. That the kind of blue collar working class identity has really been one that has centered around a white man working in a manufacturing job. And that really just hasn't been our reality for many decades. And there are many people still working in manufacturing jobs, and they are part of the working class. But we have also shifted dramatically to a service-driven economy. And a service-driven economy and and even within manufacturing, we have always been a multiracial working class, right? And so across the workforce in this country, we are a multiracial working class group of people who actually are majority women now, right? And I think that that is a really important kind of archetype shift, that we democratize who we see when we think of worker, and that we see the full range. Part of this essential worker project really is that, to be able to see fully who is the American workforce that is keeping us safe and keeping this economy moving and this country moving forward. And it is a lot of women, it is a lot of women of color, it is a lot of white people too, it's all of us. And until our archetype starts to shift and become more reflective of who the true working class is in this country, there will always be people who are left behind, and always be vulnerabilities around different groups of workers being pitted against each other, being driven into the shadows, right, being pushed downward in a segmented economy. And I think we need to just embrace who we are as a working class, and really invest in understanding that, so that we can create the federal safety net that we deserve.
Jordan asks, where do we find the guidelines being released today? And that's a great question, because I actually wrote it down for me.
Good. I think we are going to put it on the domestic workers website, which is just domesticworkers.org. If not, we will certainly have a link to the microsite. So you can always check domesticworkers.org for resources, and a few other resources to just point out. One, that we created a training for caregivers called the COVID Ready Caregiver Training Program, that basically provides a whole bunch of expert-led videos to help people understand how to keep themselves safe while they're working as caregivers. We created a caregiver emotional support text line called Care Together. So if you are a caregiver, whether you're a professional or a family caregiver, and you're just feeling underwater and would love a little bit of support and counsel, Care Together is there for you to be able to text with a peer counselor who is just waiting to hear from you, to be of support. And then an organization called Hand in Hand is a network of domestic employers who want to create this culture where employers and workers and families all work together to create healthy home environments for domestic workers. And they have a whole set of resources for employers to navigate the COVID crisis. If you have questions about what to do or what not to do, that's also a great resource for you.
Bob Borisaj asks, isn't there a danger of distinguishing rights of essential workers from workers' rights generally?
Yes, and that's why this nation community is so important, because all the essential workers frame gives us is an opportunity. And it's really up to us to continue to expand who that opportunity includes and serves. And so I see it as a moment where, for the first time, low-wage jobs like warehouse workers and Instacart gig workers and others are getting recognition and visibility, and it's forcing people to ask a question about who they see and they don't see in our work. And once you see, you can't unsee. And so I think what our job is to keep opening up who people see, using this frame as an entry point. And I think it's the biggest opening for low-wage workers to actually achieve dignified work that I've experienced really in generations. And so I do think that you run the risk of creating a dichotomy between essential and non-essential. And I also think there's a way to organize with the frame that helps people see every worker as essential.
Pamela Talise thanks you for your huge efforts and wonders, are you suggesting that we can push to expand the HEROES Act to include more progressive ideas by calling our senators and tweeting? Do you think that there's power in that for this act?
For sure. We should always be, as we're pushing to pass things and move them forward, we should always be pushing to strengthen them, because all of that does is it forces our members of Congress to take those goals and calls to action more seriously, whether it's in the short term or in the next round. And I just think yes, absolutely, it's both and. And I also just know how much, I mean, serving on the Chicago Recovery Task Force and just talking to so many cities around the country, and also states, that funding for cities and states and so many other pieces in the HEROES Act are so urgent and important. I mean, we're talking about millions of jobs, basic services to keep entire systems that are operated at the local and state level from collapsing. It's just really urgent and important. So we do have to keep pushing. And there's a lot of good in the HEROES Act, right? There's a lot of good in there. And we have to keep pushing to make it stronger. And so absolutely do both.
This might be a good point. You've brought up a lot of resources and also action items people could take, and maybe because we're nearing the end, it might be a good point to just do a quick rundown. So there's the Rosie Project.
There's the Rosie Challenge, where you take your best Rosie pose, you take a selfie and you post it on Twitter with the hashtag Rosie Challenge and also hashtag Care for All, which is kind of our evergreen call to support caregivers and have an inclusive safety net. And so we're going to keep trying to add oxygen behind that hashtag of Care for All. And then to call your members of Congress and to tweet at them and to make sure they know about your support for essential workers and for a relief package that is truly inclusive of everyone who needs support right now. And to vote. Get ready. And get your people, get your squad, and make sure that happens, because that's going to be essential, so to speak.
And what do you think in this moment, during the pandemic, is one of the most underreported story?
Underreported story. There's so many underreported stories. I honestly don't feel like we've heard enough first-person accounts of workers on all of the different front lines. I think we have heard a lot from hospital workers and nurses, and we should continue to hear more from them. And doctors and public health officials, absolutely, as frontline. And there's so many front lines in this crisis. And I would love to hear from the bus driver who continues to drive essential workers to work every day. I would love to hear from the Instacart worker about what their life was like before the COVID crisis and what it's like now. I'd love to hear from the hotel worker, right? That entire industry has been so devastated in this moment. And our colleagues at Unite Here, the Hotel Workers Union, have really just been heroic in their efforts to offer relief, but there's just millions upon millions of hospitality and hotel workers who are unsafe and really struggling right now. I want to hear the airwaves flooded with worker stories so that we actually really understand, outside of the four walls of our own rooms, what our fellow Americans are experiencing right now, because that's the only way that we'll design the solutions that we need.
We're nearing our end. We have so I want to get another question in and a comment that I see in our questions. I think we have a lot of political junkies on our call, and so we wonder, who do you like for vice president?
I don't know. I would love to see someone who is going to champion workers, low-wage workers, champion immigrants, champion women of color, and actually be really bold in the policy vision for this country, because we really deserve that kind of leadership.
Thank you so much for your time. I just want to share one comment from our audience. Claudia Klein says, thank you so much for what you do. Hoping to call you Madam Secretary in 2021.
Madam Secretary, thank you for your humanity, for your grounded work, for reminding us there is opportunity. You speak with such aspirational spirit, but also so grounded in the pragmatism of the work you've done for decades. We're honored at the Nation to have celebrated universal family care as part of our progressive honor roll. In 2019, the Nation, as you know, has survived very, very tough times. Civil War, we came out of the Civil War, the New Deal. These are unprecedented times in new ways, as we spoke of before this chat began. I mean, in 2 weeks, we're witnessing what we saw during the Great Depression, maybe over months. So how we come out of this is the work you do. I hope the journalism we're doing is holding those accountable. It's exposing and shaming, but also proposing the bold alternatives and lifting them up, like universal family care or Pramila's Paycheck Guarantee Act, which she was on. And I think, as you said, once you see, you can't unsee. So I think, speaking of what Bob Borsaj brought up, yeah, this is an opening to speak to who are essential workers, and all are essential workers.
That's right.
And that's what we need to fight for. And I think in that there's a dignity and there's a power, and there's a democratizing narrative of what is work in our society, which you have really, I think, captured so brilliantly and so humanely. So the Nation honors you. We want to cover your work. We want to cover the work of those who will follow in this chat. All of you remember, I forgot to mention Naomi Klein will also be joining us. Someone who has seen how to take a crisis and find opportunity and keep pushing on that window, as you spoke of, Ai-jen. So we wish you all the best. We hope to gather all of us someday soon. We welcome those reentry protocols, because we at the Nation, we shut our offices March 13th. We're working hard on all cylinders.
Yes.
And but we want to find that solidarity of coming back.
That's right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And join us.
Thanks for tuning in today.